let's get moving. The Russian convoy is moving towards the city. They have no clue what's about to happen. The Ukrainians, after waiting, begin an artillery attack. A direct hit. The third shot. Kaboom! Devastation. The next attack. The Russians confidently ride atop their APCs. A Ukrainian recon drone spots their movement. Leading is a tank with a mine plow. An APC follows behind. And another one. They come under artillery fire. This APC runs over mines. The second group also falls into a trap. A Russian tank, covered by an APC, tries to cross the field. The remnants of the second group can't escape the mine trap. Left alone, the tank and the APC retreat. For evacuation, the Russians call in 2 armored personnel carriers. They need to collect the wounded and pull back. Meanwhile, the tank and APC have almost left the danger zone. On their way back, they're not so lucky and explode on the remaining mines. The tank burns, ammunition detonates, and pieces of armor fly everywhere. A T-90M moves to carry out a combat mission. It's pursued by a kamikaze drone. A precise hit leads to a loss of control. The Ukrainians make a second attack. And another. The tank is definitely damaged. Ukrainian artillery attacks on an advancing Russian tank. The tank fires at the defending Ukrainians. At the worst possible moment for the Russians, the tank is disabled. Ukrainians launch a kamikaze drone and attack the tank. At that moment, a javelin missile is fired at the tank. A precise hit and detonation. Several hours ago, this Russian tank participated in an assault and was hit by an ATGM. Now, it becomes an easy target for a kamikaze drone. The flames cannot be extinguished. The tank burns to the ground. A Ukrainian drone attacks another damaged tank. The drone's warhead successfully deals with the tank's armor. Flames completely destroy it. Kaboom! A perfect hit on an APC. The fuel system is damaged. There's a small ammo load inside the APC. It detonates. The APC is burnt to a crisp. A Russian tank fleeing the battlefield at full speed. A kamikaze drone catches up with it. Ukrainians pursue the meat pot. The first hit leads to a loss of control. The second attack becomes fatal. We have a dozen more videos of Russian armored vehicles being destroyed with nothing left to comment on. I want to show you the most striking ones now. Here, a Russian tank couldn't get past its comrades. stopped by mines. A kamikaze drone dives perfectly into the unprotected body of the tank. And here, now the Ukrainians proceed to finish off the isolated targets and the abandoned damaged armor. A kamikaze drone attacks the APC. It's clear that one hit was more than enough. A powerful explosion rips the APC apart from the inside. The next target. The drone drops a grenade inside. A fire starts. The flames intensify. The meat pot is now destroyed. Time to blow up some more tanks. And some more. The second grenade. The shells inside slowly heat up. Gunpowder catches fire. The tank burns completely. Another Russian tank. After the second grenade, flames erupt inside. The fire intensifies. It now covers the entire tank. And here's the result. Ukrainians inspect a damaged Russian tank. The first attack. The second. The ammo ignites. The tank is destroyed. This armored group is destroyed. An APC speeds across the field, ignoring the danger. A big mistake. Another explosion follows. The evacuation group made the same mistake. And this is how the Shadow unit dealt with Russian tanks. This one ignited right after the grenade exploded. A ricocheting grenade flies inside. The tank bursts into flames. Here, after the explosion, we observe a powerful geyser of fire. A drone attacks a damaged tank. The second attack becomes fatal. The tank is destroyed. A Russian armored recovery vehicle evacuates a T-72 tank. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone disrupts the Russians' plans. The Russians try to detach the APC and abandon the tank, but a second attack follows up. Both the recovery vehicle and the tank are engulfed in flames. Excellent work. The first APC tries to break through a strip of woods and explodes. A second APC detours to the left, and again, an explosion. The first APC detonates. The assault and evacuation have failed. In situations like these, the Russians panic, as in this case. What was the tank driver thinking? Ahead, the ground is littered with Ukrainian mines. The tank is disabled. The Russians bring a Buck M1 air defense system into the field. After several launches, they retract the system. A kamikaze drone is already headed their way. The system is engulfed in flames. The missiles detonate. The Russians try to extinguish the fire, but it's of no use. The target is destroyed. Ukrainians discover a Russian radar system. It's an important and expensive target. The Russians use it for jamming and intercepting radio waves. And communication on the front plays a crucial role. That's why it's important for the Ukrainians to destroy this target. They used a kamikaze drone and hit the enemy system. This gas station just serviced the Pol 21 electronic warfare system. It's accompanied by a whole convoy of guards. The Ukrainians have been hunting this radar for a long time, and when the opportunity arose, they immediately attacked it with HIMARS rockets. The object is destroyed. In these next clips, a Russian 2S7 Pion self-propelled gun moves into a firing position. And it opens fire. A HIMARS missile is already in the sky. It wasn't alone. Ukrainians also torment the enemy with strikes on logistics. For instance, this truck carrying provisions. Everything burned. Another Ural truck. The target is hit.
There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely soldiers of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade from the Javelin anti-tank missile system destroyed a tank of the Russian invaders along with its crew, which was going to break through the Ukrainian defense line, but fate decreed otherwise. It is reported that according to the information received, the Ukrainian military managed to hit a tank of the Russian occupiers, which had additional protection installed on the turret designed to repel attacks using anti-tank missile systems. Video footage from an unmanned aerial vehicle shows the moment when a Russian tank approaches the positions of Ukrainian forces along a forest belt. However, the Ukrainian military responded promptly. A missile from the Javelin anti-tank system was launched and hit the tank directly under its side turret. It should be noted that the result of using the rocket was amazing. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade using FPV drones brilliantly destroyed Russian drone operators who were trying to gain a foothold in various houses of local residents in the vicinity of Avdiivka. It is reported that the Ukrainian armed forces razed several houses to the foundations in which Russian drone operators were trying to gain a foothold. The destruction of the Russian drone operators who were trying to hide from the Ukrainian FPV drones began with 6 Russian soldiers scattered and hiding in various destroyed houses of local residents. But with the help of FPV drones, the Ukrainian operator was able to brilliantly fly into the window and deal a fatal blow to 2 Russian military personnel in turn with the help of flying fragments at the moment of the explosion. Then a similar situation occurs with 3 more Russian military personnel, only in this case a Ukrainian FPV drone flew through the front door. And finally, there was a third case, where the concept of striking remained the same as in the first case.
A Ukrainian tank joins the game. In this building is the command center for the enemy army's UAV operators. The tank moves within firing range and begins taking apart the building. Every shot hits precisely its target. Take a look at these shots. Now, check out this fancy new burning Russian tank. Just 2 minutes ago, this APC was storming ahead. Now, it's on fire. Just like this Russian junk.
There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Buleva showed the moment how 2 Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drones effectively struck Russian vehicles transporting military personnel to the position area near the village of Nekoleki. It is reported that the story of this video begins from the moment when 5 Russian soldiers get into a Russian car in one of the villages of the Donetsk region. The following shows the moment how a Russian car moves from one village in the direction of its positions. But the Ukrainian military did not give them the opportunity to reach the final point as they launched a kamikaze FPV drone. Suddenly and with unexpected force, the kamikaze drone crashes into the car, sending it into a burst of fire. In just a moment, the car bursts into flames like a match, with the crew inside. From this video it becomes clear that all 5 Russian soldiers in the car did not have time to leave the car. A similar trick was demonstrated with a second Russian car. Only in the second car was the exact number of Russian military personnel unknown, but even if there were all 2 of them there, this is also a good result. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely fighters of the Griffin unmanned aerial vehicle Unit 501 showed the moment how, with the help of an FPV kamikaze drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders from which fire was fired from the Igla portable anti-aircraft missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian military. It is reported that the footage shown shows how a Russian military man with a portable anti-aircraft missile system settled in a very advantageous position, namely at a commanding height in one of the houses of local residents. And he didn't notice the kamikaze drone approaching them. As a result of this operation, 1 occupier was killed and 3 who were nearby were injured. The video, shot by 2 unmanned aerial vehicles by an observer and the kamikaze drone itself, is clear evidence of this incident. First, drone footage shows a kamikaze drone exploding on invaders in one of the buildings. Then pre-mortem footage of the drone itself is shown, showing its final moments before the explosion.
Another APC. Beautiful. And the final target. This one got the farthest, but it didn't save it from destruction. Excellent work. Facing such fierce resistance, the Russians decide to hide their APC in a garage. 3 kamikaze drones attack the target. The APC was burned. If you look closely, you can see its turret. The northern region. APCs fall into a trap. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone first blows up one. The second target. This APC thought it would find protection in a strip of forest. The APC is burned. And this is a strike on Russian logistical support, a truck carrying supplies. The Ukrainians sent a second drone. After meeting the truck, it flared up. Fire destroyed the entire vehicle. The Russians stopped to fix their truck. Ukrainians took advantage of the pause and delivered a devastating strike. Ukrainian drones come to spook the enemy. The first target is TM-62 anti-tank mines. What a powerful explosion! And here's the fourth grad. The fifth target. Another strike by HIMARS. The grad is destroyed. And that's not all. Another MLRS. And take a look at the fire after being hit. Another excellent fireworks display. This series concludes with this strike. Some very effective work. How about this visit by a kamikaze drone to an enemy bunker? I don't know what was stored there, but it burned and detonated for a long time. A beautiful spectacle. The Russian radar Yastreb with an astonishing cost of $250 million. Ukrainians didn't hesitate to use HIMARS missiles to destroy such a rare and important target. From this video, it becomes clear just how destructive FPV drones can be. After the second hit, a part of the building simply crumbled. And this happened even though the drone exploded inside, not upon impact with a wall. Now, the Bradley has lived up to its nickname, Tank Killer. In these next frames, a modern Russian T-90M tank turns into a sieve. The American combat monster once again confirmed its effectiveness. The M242 Bushmaster cannon is capable of penetrating up to 40 millimeters of steel armor. The fatal mistake of this Russian tank is its position relative to the Bradley. Incendiary and armor-piercing rounds damaged the tank's systems. The crew panicked, released smoke screens, and tried to retreat. But the machine already had its critical damage. This is what a Russian tank looks like after an encounter with Brad. Bradley came to stop the Russian infantry, which is crossing the field to storm Ukrainian positions. Even if the Russians reach another planting, it changes nothing. The cannon cuts down trees like thin branches. They offer no cover. This is an incident near Avdiivka. Ukrainian assault troops called for reinforcements. The Bradley IFV easily suppresses the Russian advance. And even if the Russians manage to occupy a building, there's no sense in hiding in it. Brad's cannon will riddle the building's walls. Another thwarted attack of Russian tanks. The kamikaze drone pursues the target and hits the tank in the most vulnerable part of the turret. This part of the Russian tank stores some of the ammunition. That's why they often explode after being hit by drones. The turret was thrown several meters from the tank. Excellent work. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone enters the Russian tank with precision. After a few seconds of agonizing wait, an explosion occurs. It seems the Ukrainians have started using self-destructing systems for drones in such cases. Smoke, fire, and a spectacular explosion. This video is yet another good example. The Russians should have long considered the storage of ammunition in the tank turret. Look at the force with which the turret is thrown up. At that moment, incredible pressure is created inside the tank. After the failed assault, the Russians abandoned their tank. Ukrainians use FPV drones to destroy it. One of the hits proves fatal for the Russian tank. Kamikaze drones can reach Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry in the most inaccessible places or several kilometers from the front line. In this video, the Russians are preparing fortification structures, and engineering equipment is at work. The drone dives into an excavator, and an explosion occurs. The fuel ignites brilliantly. The job is done perfectly. Or this operation to destroy a BM-21 Grad in the rear. Special forces identify the target, launched a drone, and directed it to the Russian rocket artillery. The Russians tried to change their location, but they couldn't escape pursuit. The existence of this BM-21 Grad is terminated. Ukrainians deploy artillery to hinder this. As things heat up, the tank starts to retreat. At that moment, it's caught by a kamikaze drone. The modern Russian tank is destroyed. And here's a cargo truck and an armored car, Tiger. They both become easy prey for kamikaze drones. A Russian cargo truck brought ammunition to the positions, and the Ukrainians immediately destroyed it. What a pity. Now it's the turn of this Soviet junk, a T-62 tank from 1967. This is the kind of scrap the Russians are pulling to the front. Now it's the APC's turn. One grenade and $400,000 turns into scrap metal. A drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Target 3. The flame gradually intensifies. Ammunition starts to detonate. It's beautiful. Here are 2 Russian tanks from one of the failed attacks I showed at the beginning. The Ukrainians target a T-90 tank. This video shows the perfect performance of a 155mm smart projectile. Pay attention to the accuracy. You can clearly see the trajectory of the projectile in these shots. For example, this is the defeat of a Russian tank by a Javelin missile. There was no detonation. Apparently, it was without ammunition. Abandoned Russian equipment must be destroyed. Kamikaze drones are excellent at this task. Look how this drone neatly flies inside the AFV. Nice work. Naturally, it was not without epic explosions. This is how beautifully the Russian AFV turned into scrap metal. Also, this Russian tank. Nice bang. Another tank of militants. A Ukrainian soldier videotapes the detonation of the tank. Near Sivur. The Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The Russians begin the attack. The tank goes first, followed by the BMP. The armored personnel carrier continuously fires at them. At some point, the armored personnel carrier turns into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. What weapon do you think is capable of this? At first, I thought it was a Javelin or anti-tank mines, but no, it was a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Wow, what a powerful explosion! And here's what happened to the Russian tank that was leading. First, the Ukrainians immobilized it, then directed a kamikaze drone at it and burned it. It's no secret that Ukrainians have managed to secure positions on the left bank of Kherson. It was these positions that Russian tanks aimed to storm. The Ukrainians don't have heavy machinery here, but they do have kamikaze drones. A drone strikes the tank's turret, and not even an armored shield can handle that. The shaped charge reaches the ammunition, causing a massive detonation. Let's return to the destruction of equipment. I've got more to show. The drone dives into its target. The APC is instantly engulfed in flames. In 30 minutes, the Russian APC was completely burned out. That's simply the amount of time it took the Ukrainians to replace the battery and return. This is a Russian tank. And this is the same tank through the eyes of a kamikaze drone. A perfect hit. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone inspected the Russian tracked crematorium. Or take a look at this video. 5 kamikaze drones attack a Russian tank. The 5th hit becomes fatal for the Russian armor. A crater is formed in the tank's location. Can you imagine the power of that explosion? I think that after such a strike, this tank is not combat ready. As in this case. And here's another T-90, which couldn't cross a puddle and got stuck in the mud. And this is all on one section of the front. Can you imagine how many resources Russia is burning in this war? The enemy is very strong. Yes, these are tracked crematoriums, and the Russian soldiers taking part in this, lunatics. Here's the perfect example. The incendiary mixture falls on the netting protecting the tank from grenades and bombs. The contents gradually drip onto the tank, and the flames spread to the hull. Let's move now to another section of the front where constant fighting is taking place. These 2 APCs were stopped by mines. After one of them explodes, another explosion occurs. Pay attention to this exact moment here. An armor plate falls on a mine, hits it, and another explosion happens. This APC was carrying ammunition to Russian soldiers at their positions. Another pair of APCs. The drone first approaches from the left side, but the hit doesn't yield the desired result. Then, the Ukrainians send a second drone. This hit becomes fatal. Both APCs are destroyed. The Ukrainians thwarted the Russians' attempt to evacuate their damaged tank. The strike drone returns with explosives to prevent such attempts in the future. The mission was completed successfully. Another Russian tank. The drone again hits the target precisely. This piece of Russian junk is also destroyed. The Russians are moving the 2S-19 Masta-S self-propelled howitzer into the forest to hide it from Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. The Ukrainians, however, see all of this. When the howitzer is securely hidden, the Ukrainians launch a HIMARS missile at it. The target is eliminated. These are the frames of the work of a Russian UAV team. A Ukrainian drone tracked a Russian reconnaissance drone and followed it to the command post. Then, the HIMARS took over. The OSA anti-aircraft missile system is moving towards the forest to hide from the Ukrainians. As you might have guessed, the Russians didn't succeed. The Russian army's attack, meant to bring strategic success, did not go as planned. Russian tanks were blowing up, burning, and exploding again. Let's take a closer look. Tanks, APCs, and airborne troops, all ready for battle, split into small groups. The Ukrainians are using cluster bombs. An ATGM hits a Russian APC. A tank deploys troops in an open field. Now, this APC is nothing more than a meat grinder. The second group is just hundreds of meters from Ukrainian positions. They were met with a surprise left overnight. Pay attention to this synchronization. And these are the daredevils who went on solo attacks. Pure madness. The third group consists of APCs and the madmen inside of them. A precise ATGM hit stops the Russian armored vehicle. A tank and 3 APCs. The Ukrainians are simply picking off tanks with javelins. Russian tanks are engulfed in flames. The attack goes on. APCs rush to take cover. It almost made it. But then, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone catches up with the APC. Now, check out this video. This column was just decimated. Ukrainians strike with cluster bombs to destroy the enemy's manpower. It's rather effective. This APC made an unforgivable mistake. From just 10 to 20 meters away, Ukrainians destroy it with an RPG shot. Such bravery deserves a like. And here's an ATGM Stugna P missile nearly hitting a Russian APC. The Russians try to dig in at one of the settlements in the Avdiivka region. A dozen soldiers disembark on the village's outskirts. An unpleasant surprise awaits them on the other side of the village. As the soldiers leave the APC, it drives away. Notice this moment. A kamikaze drone flies over the APC. The drone continues to tail the Russian armored vehicle. The operator waits for the right moment to deliver a crushing blow. The APC is immobilized. Another Ukrainian drone strikes. The APC is destroyed. Here, for example, is published footage of the storming of a house with Russian soldiers inside. At least 5 targets were recorded. After that, the work with a mortar began. The first shot hit nearby. Then, the FPV drone was involved. It flew directly into the window and triggered a fire. The mortar work continued. The second shot missed again, but the third hit the target. While the mortar was working, the Russian Volunteer Corps infantrymen managed to approach the house and started firing RPGs. While they were doing this, the second drone flew up. And here, they destroyed an expensive electronic warfare system in the Belgorod region. It's not to say the Russians were ready for this. Quite the opposite. You can find a lot of footage of border guards throwing down their weapons and running away from the battlefield.
A series of Ukrainian counterattacks in March halted the enemy advance from the direction of Avdiivka. Ukraine has lauded its recent success in taking out a slew of tanks, armored vehicles, and Russian forces near the embattled former Ukrainian stronghold of Avdiivka, illustrating a Russian strategy that continues to echo mistakes that cost Moscow dearly in the early weeks of the war, despite recent territorial gains. The reserves brought into action by the Ukrainians helped to push the invaders out of some areas of Berdichi, Orlivka, and Tonenki, which had been seized in the previous days, thus bringing some relative stability to the front line. Fighting for control of these localities and the areas between them is ongoing. The main Russian thrust is directed at Semenivka, which lies on the hills on the western side of the line of ponds, and which they are trying to reach from 2 directions, from the northeast via Berdichi and the southeast via Orlivka. By halting the Russian advance and thus preventing their forces from quickly crossing the line of ponds west of Avdiivka, the Ukrainians gained time to reinforce their second line of defense, which was decidedly weaker and virtually unfortified. According to some Ukrainian sources, the failure to invest in fortifications forced the former command, headed by General Valery Zaluzhny, to try and keep hold of Avdiivka. It remains unclear whether the Russians will decide to bring additional units into the fight to resume the advance quickly once they have entered the range of hills to the west of the line of ponds, whether they will attempt to build on their success and move out into the operational space. Indeed, the relatively high tempo of the Russian operations to date, the Russians have occupied an area of nearly 100 kilometer marks in just over 2 weeks, since the defenders started their withdrawal from Avdiivka, was not simply the result of Russian units going on the offensive. They took advantage of the relative weakness of the Ukrainian troops and their inability to organize an effective defense in unfavorable terrain conditions, initially along the Stepo-Vostochny-Severn line and later along the Berdichi-Horrifying line. Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Army, General Oleksandr Syrsky, placed the responsibility for the failures at the front on the commanders of some of the units fighting there and threatened to dismiss those who were assessed negatively. On 29 February, he stated that during an ongoing audit, some miscalculations in the management of the situation and assessment of the enemy were detected in some commanders, which directly affected the stability of the defense in some directions. On the 2nd March, he reported that groups of professional advisors had been sent to brigades experiencing staff problems to pass on their experience and provide assistance. In cases where the commander is not in control of the situation and his actions and orders pose a direct threat to the life and health of his subordinates, Syrsky announced that personnel decisions would be taken. At the same time, he reported that all the necessary decisions had been taken to provide brigades with reserves, ammunition, drones, and other equipment. He also listed those units that had positively distinguished themselves from the others, the 25th Airborne Brigade and the 47th Mechanized Brigade, which showed courage and determination in the battles for Horrifying and Berdichi. The 79th Air Assault Brigade, which repelled enemy attacks in the Novomykhailivka area, and the 54th Mechanized Brigade, whose soldiers destroyed 2 enemy columns. The Institute for the Study of War, ISW, a U.S. think tank that closely follows the conflict in Ukraine, described the Russian attack around Tonenka as Moscow's first battalion-sized mechanized assault since the Kremlin kicked off its offensive on Avdiivka last October. A Russian tank battalion typically contains upwards of 30 vehicles. Fresh off claiming Avdiivka in mid-February, Russia's first significant victory since the fall of Bakhmut in May 2023, the loss of so many vehicles in one fell swoop is a callback to the early errors and sky-high armored losses that Moscow suffered in the first phase of its full-scale invasion 2 years ago. There are some similarities between this Russian attack near Tonenka and those Russian assaults early in the war, said Bryden Sperling, senior research leader for defense and security with the European branch of the RAND think tank. It's surprising that the column in Tonenki mostly used a single road and didn't appear to use the open ground on either side and spread its forces out, though it looks like some vehicles did try to disperse, he told Newsweek. The Russian crews may have been worried about muddy terrain or mines, he added, saying, either way, these were significant losses of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. Near Tonenka, we saw almost the same mistakes from their side as near Volodar in the previous year. Major Viktor Tregubov, a Ukrainian journalist and editor who now serves in the Ukrainian military, told Newsweek. Volodar, a small village in southern Ukraine, was the scene of intense clashes for several weeks in early 2023. Ukrainian officials told the New York Times then that it was the biggest tank battle of the war so far. Analysts previously told Newsweek that organizational and planning failures plagued Russia's first armored assaults during its initial invasion in 2022. Ruptures in the chain of command, poor training, and heavy initial casualties left few Russian soldiers to train the next generation of tank crews. Russia has since burned through its tank arsenal. In February, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a UK-based think tank, estimated that Moscow had lost more than 3,000 tanks in 2 years of war, more than its entire pre-war active fleet. Russia's tank losses are estimated at even higher by Ukraine, at more than 7,000. Yet Moscow has put its massive defense industry on a war footing, helping to replenish its fleet while still taking constant hits from Ukrainian forces. Domestic Russian tank production has increased fivefold since February 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin said earlier this year. The Kremlin has also pulled old tanks from storage and repurposed antiquated vehicles to ferry and detonate explosives around a target. They know that they have materiel superiority and can afford to be reckless, said Tregubov, the Ukrainian journalist turned soldier. They seem to have little regard for personnel losses and throw units at the Ukrainian lines in an attempt to exhaust the defenders and find weak spots, added RAND analyst Sperling. Military analysts broadly agree that Russia has, for the most part, reevaluated some of its early tactics. The Kremlin launched its invasion underprepared and overconfident, Sperling said, as its armored vehicles got caught in Ukrainian ambushes without enough infantry support to shield them. Russia now has lots of personnel and has switched to preserving its equipment and using very infantry-heavy tactics, Sperling said. They have adapted and are now playing to some of their strengths.
As I promised, I'm releasing part 2. Let's take a look at the madness that the Russians are engaging in. Klishchivka. At this point, the Russians have become more active and are trying to regain control of the settlement. A Russian armored strike group is moving across the fields towards the settlement. A Ukrainian drone is performing reconnaissance and adjusting artillery. Kaboom! The Russian guys are starting to have some serious problems on their hands. Ukrainian artillery begins to work the stalled column. 2 Russian armored personnel carriers are engulfed in flames. An immobilized tank stands nearby. The assault has failed.
There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely a Russian tank breakthrough occurred where, during a breakthrough of the Ukrainian defense, a Russian tank was blown up by an anti-tank mine, as a result of which the ammunition detonated. The Ukrainian military reportedly demonstrated its readiness and foresight by proactively planting anti-tank mines on a road behind enemy lines. This strategic decision was determined not only by knowledge of the terrain, but also by the analysis of intelligence information about possible enemy routes. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, soldiers of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade showed the moment how a Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone struck a moving Russian motorcycle with a Russian military man in the vicinity of the village of Robotino. It is reported that fighters of the Ukrainian armed forces showed a video shot by 2 unmanned aerial vehicles, namely an observer and the kamikaze drone itself. First, footage is shown from Avdiivka of a kamikaze drone, which first circles in order to subsequently strike a Russian motorcycle directly in the rear of the seat area. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and operators of the Strike Drones Company unit showed the moment how Ukrainian intelligence officers revealed the presence of 6 Russian military personnel in the ruins of a building in the vicinity of the destroyed village of Stepovoy. Realizing the threat posed by these Russian military personnel, several Avdiivka drones were immediately dispatched to eliminate the threat. Ukrainian Avdiivka drone operators are reported to have wasted no time in taking responsibility for eliminating this threat. 3 kamikaze drones were launched into action. The first Avdiivka drone struck with a high explosive charge, after which the Russians were knocked down and they were unable to get out of their cover. But that was only the beginning. The second drone made its way, releasing a debris charge that not only hit the enemy, but also caused a fire that consumed part of the surrounding space. However, knowing about the survivability of Russian soldiers, the Ukrainians did not relax. They sent another Avdiivka drone with a high explosive charge to finally end this situation. This day became an indicator of the high professionalism and determination of the Ukrainian military. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade ambushed an elite Russian assault group, which was moving in a column consisting of tanks and armored personnel carriers near Avdiivka. It is reported that fighters from a company of attack drones ambushed an elite Russian assault group in the village of Berdyshy. Namely, the Ukrainian defenders took up more advantageous positions in advance, and during the battle, with the help of FPV drones, they were able to destroy several units of Russian equipment. In the first episode, a Ukrainian FPV drone flew into Russian armored vehicles, which were transporting infantry directly on the vehicle. Although an iron grill was welded onto the armored vehicle in order to prevent kamikaze drones from delivering a more accurate attack on the vehicle. But in this case, there was still a scattering of fragments as a result of the explosion, which caused the main damage to the Russian occupiers. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, using FPV drones, brilliantly destroyed the Russian infantry, which was trying to gain a foothold in one of the houses of local residents. It is reported that the Ukrainian armed forces smashed the building to the foundation in which Russian infantry tried to gain a foothold. This happened in an occupied village in the village of Berdyshy, Donetsk region. The destruction of Russian military infantry, which tried to occupy strategically important positions in the house of local residents, is an important step in protecting civilians and ensuring the security of the territory. The corresponding video, shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, shows how the enemy decided to hide from the Ukrainian armed forces in one of the houses of local residents. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely Flying Skull aerial reconnaissance fighters showed the moment of destruction of the Russian self-propelled artillery unit Pion, which was firing at the positions of the Ukrainian military near the village of Kostogrizovo Kherson region. It is reported that, with the help of reconnaissance, the location of the enemy self-propelled artillery unit Pion was established, which fired at a firing position and tried to hide in one of the forest plantations in the Kherson region. As a result of the adjustments and the provided target designations, the defense forces fired at the target using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. As a result of the strike, the enemy's self-propelled artillery installation was successfully destroyed. It is obvious that the Ukrainian military delivered the first strike with very high surgical precision, and as a result, the shell fell directly on a Russian self-propelled artillery unit and completely destroyed it. Judging by the explosion and scattering of debris, it appears that the Ukrainian military used a GMLRS projectile. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the defense forces of the south of Ukraine destroyed a rare Russian electronic warfare station Field 21. Designed to suppress satellite navigation channels, which the Russians were proud of and shouted to the whole world that there were no analogs and it was almost impossible to destroy it. It is reported that the armed forces of Ukraine, using the coordinates received from the Ukrainian Shark reconnaissance drone, launched a strike from the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system at a gas station in the village of Veliki Kopany, Cherson region, where at that moment the Russian electronic warfare station Field 21 was located. This is one of the newest Russian radar systems of the Russian army, which is designed to protect strategically important objects from cruise missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, and guided bombs. As stated, the complex can control airspace within a radius of more than 50 kilometers. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Russian military showed the moment how a Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone tries to strike a moving Russian atop in the vicinity of Avdiivka, but unfortunately explodes a few meters from the target. It is reported that the Russian military showed a video shot with an action camera that was mounted on the head of one of the Russian soldiers. As a result, the Ukrainian FPV drone fell a little to the right of the target in the field. But this did not prevent the Russian military from receiving several moderate injuries from the explosion of an FPV drone as a result of flying fragments. The Ukrainian FPV drone, although it did not reach the specified target, still caused a certain severity of injury. This incident highlights how dangerous and unpredictable the tactics and techniques used in modern warfare can be. Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, including kamikaze drones, are becoming increasingly used to carry out targeted strikes against enemies, but they also pose risks to their own forces and civilians. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, soldiers of the 11th Separate Motorized Infantry Battalion Kievan Rus showed video footage of them launching an anti-tank guided missile from the roof of a building in the direction of an already destroyed armored personnel carrier, in which the Russian infantry is hiding and has equipped an observation post there from which they have been monitoring Ukrainian positions and tracking the movement of Ukrainian equipment. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed drone footage of Russian infantry hiding in an already destroyed armored personnel carrier because there was nowhere else to hide. The Ukrainian military, using reconnaissance from drones, from time to time tracked the movements of Russian troops, who from time to time climbed out of a destroyed armored personnel carrier to conduct reconnaissance activities on Ukrainian troops.
2 APCs packed with paratroopers race across the open terrain. They are detected and try to break through with a fight. Kamikaze drones are directed at them. This is what the operator of a Ukrainian FPV drone sees. Drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Another T-90. It's easy to recognize by its unique turret. It is also destroyed. On the battlefield, many damaged but not destroyed tanks remain. While the Russians have retreated, it's necessary to destroy what they left behind in their fight. Thus, the Ukrainians will now be burning tank after tank, APC after APC, leaving nothing for the Russians. Yet ahead is still half a video with a large amount of destroyed Russian armor. I wonder what these Russians were discussing. The Ukrainians release a birdie with explosives. It hits the armored personnel carrier. The explosion easily tears it apart and scatters pieces of armor. A powerful blast. And how about this beauty? A kamikaze drone strikes an abandoned Russian armored personnel carrier. The damage causes a fire, and then an explosion. Beautiful footage of burning Russian junk. Here's another piece of Russian junk. The drone flies right inside. The fire does its job. When the drone returned, it found this. And who do we have here? This drone perfectly flies into the armored personnel carrier, and then it's the same old story. And here's another Russian tank. The operator perfectly executes the task and destroys the tank. There's another target nearby, also a tank. Watch how beautifully it explodes after the drones hit. Another example. 2 Russian tanks were stopped by Ukrainian warriors. Ukrainians used kamikaze drones to finish them off completely. This Russian APC decided to pave its own way. Relying on luck, the APC rushes towards the trench, but explodes on mines. This venture cost the Russians another APC. In the tree line, a Russian tank stops. A fatal mistake. After the first hit, it accelerates and charges towards the Ukrainians. The second hit immobilizes it. It immediately catches fire. Take a look at these flames. The Russian tank is destroyed. The negligence of this APC became fatal. Venturing into direct fire from the Ukrainian tank, there was no escape for it. One shot and the target is hit. Impact and explosion. This is how it looks from the tank's perspective. Such precise work deserves a thumbs up. The Russian column of tanks and APCs was spotted by the Ukrainians. They split into groups and attack from several directions at once. The first to come under fire is an APC. Next, the Ukrainians destroy a tank. This APC runs over mines. It turned into a crematorium on tracks. And this is a hit from a Javelin missile. The affected tank moves about 10 meters and stops. The Russians try to flee, but run into mines. Out of the entire column, only this armored personnel carrier manages to survive. It crosses the road and gets stuck. Today, we're going to dive into this madness and try to answer the question, what's wrong with the Russian army? It all starts with the insane attacks of Russian armored groups. The crew of this tank doesn't realize it's walked into a trap. Not only are Ukrainian soldiers to the left of the tank, but there are also surprises laid out on the road ahead. By the way, a Ukrainian soldier missed the tank with an anti-tank guided missile, but the mines saved the day. The second tank, not wanting to meet the same fate as its comrades, starts to reverse. The chances of escaping the battlefield seem slim, but they try anyway. The second Russian tank also explodes on the mines. The attack is a failure. Looks like another armored group. The first tank, equipped with a mine plow, leads the way, and for good reason. It hits the mines and stops. In these frames, Ukrainians finish off a previously halted Russian tank. A powerful explosion. No chance. Take, for example, this Russian tank. Its attempt to hide from the battlefield failed. Here's another good example. The tank was leaving, but the drone struck it and detonated the ammunition. For our channel sponsors, an uncensored video with unique footage has just been released. You can find the link in the description of this video and in the hint. This kamikaze drone circles around an MTLB abandoned by the Russians. The operator chooses the most favorable angle for the attack. He manages to land the drone right in the open hatch and destroys the Russian junk. In this place, a Russian tank hit mines and was immobilized, and then it awaited a quite obvious fate. Another Russian tank, and the same exact fate. Another one? Maybe it's time for us to create a ranking of the most beautiful destruction of Russian tanks by Ukrainian kamikaze drones. The legendary Buhanka and its adventures in Ukraine. Another one. It's so symbolic that it's standing near an Orthodox cross. And that's all. Powerful. These Russians thought that the night would help them hide from Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians modify kamikaze drones, installing night vision cameras in them. Take a look at how clearly the Russian APC is visible at night. The second hit. Excellent work. This Russian tank, after enduring 4 bombs to the engine compartment, is headed for the scrapyard. This Russian tank drives over mines and becomes an easy target for the Javelin anti-tank missile. A precise hit. The missile penetrates inside and ignites the propellants. The tank, utterly destroyed. This tank joined the Russian army in 2022, but today, Ukrainians put an end to its tour on their lands. But these are not the only targets that Ukrainians have hit. 2 kamikaze drones destroyed this Strela 10 air defense system. And this is how HIMARS rockets struck the Grad MLRS. The second target was camouflaged, but that didn't hinder its detection and destruction. For the third target, Ukrainians waited for the right moment and then delivered a devastating blow with a kamikaze drone. The operator of this drone is a real ace. The hatch of the Russian tank was open less than half. Take another look at this throw. The tank catches fire. Are the Russians running out of tanks? This attack used only APCs. The first target is hit. While these Russians were thinking about what to do next, another drone came in. And here's the strike on the third APC. 3 drones at once. In parallel, the Ukrainians continue to destroy the Russian army using familiar weapons. Let's take a look at some of the work of HIMARS, artillery, and drones. A shark hits a Russian fuel tanker and several other Russian vehicles. The first artillery strike spooked the Russians, and one of the vehicles left the position. A little later, a passenger car arrived at the position to evacuate the unlucky ones. And this is the work of the National Guard of Ukraine. In this footage, you are watching the work of the Russian army's mortar crew. The reconnaissance drone is correcting the artillery strikes, and the Ukrainians' first shot hits the target and destroys it. Nice work. Nearby, the drone detects a UAV. A precise hit on the target. Fire and detonation. Shark UAV plus HIMARS MLRS is a deadly combination. Let's take a look at a practical example. First, the drone tracks down future victims. When it arrives at the parking lot, the coordinates are transmitted to the HIMARS, which in turn fires a missile at each target. As a result, the Pion, Grad, and Masta S are destroyed. The author of the video signed these strikes as HIMARS strikes on the electronic warfare R-934 Borysoglebsk 2 complex near Donetsk. I'm not sure that these are HIMARS. It kind of looks more like ordinary artillery, but it doesn't change the results. The complex completely destroyed. The Russians, having come under Ukrainian fire, requested evacuation, and an armored personnel carrier moved in. The Ukrainians saw this and launched several kamikaze drones. Now the Russians have no means of transportation and are stuck in a dangerous position. A Russian BMP-2. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. Sharks tracked down an enemy location. 8 trucks, possibly for transporting personnel and ammunition. A second hit causes ammunition to ignite in one of the trucks. Vehicles nearby must have been damaged in the strikes as well. For dozens of soldiers, this day was their last. Excellent work by the reconnaissance and artillery. I don't know what the crew of this tank was doing, but they didn't do it for long. Suddenly, a Ukrainian drone knocked into the engine compartment and interrupted them. Another tank destroyed. This Buhanka was transporting weapons for Russian soldiers, but was stopped in time by a Ukrainian drone. This is a Russian Ural truck, and it has an automatic grenade launcher mounted on top. A kamikaze drone manages to hit a target that is already retreating. The second drone secures this result. Another armored personnel carrier arrives to evacuate the Russian soldiers. A third drone flies in to prevent it. Fortunately for the Russians, the drone does not reach them in time due to heavy interference. But that's not all. The Ukrainians have spotted another target, another BMP. A kamikaze drone qualitatively fulfills the task. To make sure of it, a second drone arrives, also armed with explosives. There's no need for it, and so it flies away. A Russian tank was abandoned after a failed assault. The operator is trying to get the drone into the open hatch. It succeeds on the second attempt. Now we can watch a beautiful fire show. In these frames, Ukrainian kamikaze drones are killing what is left of the Russian column after meeting with the Ukrainians. Who wants a deep-fried Buhanka? A drone blast rips the car apart from the inside out. The SBU has discovered a warehouse with anti-tank mines. At any moment, the Russians may use them to strengthen their defenses, so we must not delay. The warehouse is destroyed. Another truck with a mortar. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone goes after its target. Nice hit. A Russian T-80 tank. After another meaty assault, the Russians abandoned it. Now, the Ukrainians will take care of it. It burns well. During a daytime reconnaissance mission, a vehicle was detected moving towards the forward positions. Having followed the movement of the car, the Ukrainians discovered the deployment of Russian soldiers. The decision was made to destroy the vehicle and make the occupants nervous. As it later turned out, the vehicle was carrying ammunition. After the failed attack, the Russians drop their cans and flee. The drone hovers over the AFV and makes the first drop. A grenade falls nearby. The operator corrects the drone. The second grenade hits the target. This, however, is not enough. The armored vehicle must be destroyed. The fourth grenade hits exactly in the engine compartment. Now, it can be considered that the task is accomplished. In the morning, the drone returns to evaluate its nightly work. You can see the results on your screens. Russian-style demining. It turned out to be quite effective. A Russian tank hits the first, second, third mine, and imagine that it's still able to continue moving. Although the explosions look quite impressive. The tank passes through a wooded area, enters a field, and begins to clear anti-personnel mines. Once again, it hits an anti-tank mine. This was enough for the tank to catch fire, and the crew decided to abandon it. A good example for other Russian tankers to destroy armored vehicles.